Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. Right now you're hearing music I made with my 16-bit Ableton Live pack, which is a collection of 105 Ableton Live instrument racks made from the Sega Genesis's YM2612 FM sound card. I sampled a wide variety of sounds coming out of the Genesis and even loaded sounds from some of my favorite games, such as the bass line of Streets of Rage or some of the leads from Sonic the Hedgehog, and sampled those and built these instruments. This allows you to get a very authentic 16-bit FM sound in your music. You can get this and all kinds of Ableton Live packs by heading down to my site, brianfunk.com. Hello and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. My name is Brian Funk, I'm your host, and today I'll be speaking with Django. Django is an artist out of South Africa. He is a hybrid DJ, he's a songwriter, musician. He's really doing a lot of cool stuff with his live performances. Also, he's got some nice hacks he's going to tell us for inspiration, which is always helpful. He's using Ableton Live for radio. And I'm very excited to talk to you. You come highly recommended from John Bartman, who I had on episode 211. He does the How I Make Music podcast. So we had a great chat, and he said we would hit it off. And judging from our opening interactions here, I think he's right. So it's really nice to have you on the show, Django.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. And yeah, thanks to John. Many thanks to John. He's awesome.
Yeah, great podcast. If anyone listening is interested, which you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, it's about how people are making music, especially for like audio stories, which is a really cool like way to do music, you know, that I think maybe people don't think about right away when they first pick up their instrument or download GarageBand or whatever. But it's a definite powerful thing, you know, the way music helps us tell stories is it's vital, and it's really nice to hear behind the scenes stuff about that. So How I Make Music podcast, plug it.
Hell yeah. I also dig how those audio dramas are kind of coming back in vogue, because obviously like that's what my mother and them grew up on, listening to the radio before they had TV. And I think it probably even coincided with TV for a while. There used to be radio dramas on the radio. And that was just a part of their childhood that we didn't experience, you know? And I think now people are like saturated with TV and overproduced content. And sometimes you want to listen to something on the road or cycling, or it makes perfect sense. And now that we have the technology in our pockets, we can do that.
Yeah, it is like a throwback thing to like an art form, really, that unfortunately sort of got washed away in the TV storm. But I think these days, you know, like now having a phone with like Audible or just podcasts too, like it's just brought back this audio only form of entertainment. You know, I haven't turned on the radio, like FM or AM radio, in quite a while now. And I think maybe there was a little bit of it going on there, but it is cool that now there's this like kind of emerging new platform for all of that stuff. Just another art form that is getting some new light.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm pumped to have you here to talk about your work and your background in music and some of the things you've picked up along the way. How do you describe yourself, or maybe how can I ask you to explain the hybrid DJ? This is like the kind of like slogan or title I've seen through your stuff, and I think it's a pretty cool and interesting way of thinking about DJing. So I'd love to hear it come from you.
Sure. I mean, basically, I first DJ'd when I was 16, kind of by accident. I don't know if I was even aware of DJs at all. I used to when I first heard music, it was on a radio, and they were usually cassette radios in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. And at some point, it went from a cassette player to a CD player, and I started collecting CDs in my sort of early teens from like age 11 or so, I think. And I had a very unusual trajectory. I first heard electronic music that I like really loved on a jazz radio station that decided to play some like lounge music on a Saturday night. And heard Kruder and Dorfmeister. I don't know if you know them. It was like a CD from the late 90s, a mix CD of theirs that's really cool. It was like they didn't stick to one tempo. The mixes were really, really slick. And it was a very interesting introduction to music that got me into it. So yeah, then when I started DJing, it was just an uncle who was like having a party, and he had some gear there. And I was like, so he just sort of showed me, okay, so it's 2 CD players and here's some headphones. In fact, we didn't have headphones for the first. I ended up playing for 6 hours at this party, having just sort of learned the gear and without headphones. So I knew all my track numbers because I was listening to my CDs every day. Like I knew, my favorite tracks on here, like track 9 on this one and track 10 on that one. And so I just played this set thinking like at some point the pros are going to arrive and like DJ at this party. And eventually these guys came and played for like an hour, and then they were like, I'm out of music. And I was like, what? So I carried on playing again. So all in all, yeah, it was like a 6 to 8 hour inaugural set basically at 16. And then that was kind of the bug bit me, and I always had some sort of DJ controllers and dabbling with software. I had M Audio Talk for a while, and I still do. I still have their controller. I've been using it in Traktor now, and basically my issue with Ableton I found was you almost have to do too much preparation. You have to sort of warp your music, and if you want to skip ahead, you need to kind of plan that ahead. You need to have a separate scene that's your like verse and chorus, for example. Whereas in Traktor and most DJ software, you can set cue points on the fly. You can jump like 8 bars forward or 8 bars backward in time, like on the fly. And I just find it, ironically, I feel a lot more improvised and live with the music when I'm DJing out of DJ software. So, but then I still wanted the Ableton side for effects. I've got bongos that I've been playing. So my setup at the moment for DJing is basically Ableton for processing the bongos and also playing keys on push. And I've got a foot pedal. At some point I had it hooked up so I could loop the bongos, like put live into overdub mode. So whatever track I'm on, I could hit record overdub on my foot and play keys, and then hit out when it's like 2 bars or however long, and then that'll loop. Or if it's the bongos, the main thing is you need 2 hands. So the pedal was like really handy. I have this, highly recommend this guy, the Line 6 FBV Express. The guys at the music shop didn't even realize that it had the USB socket, transmits MIDI over USB. There's a little Line 6 control app, FBV control, I think it's called. And you can assign like CCs to the buttons and the expression pedal. And you can click the expression pedal to go between volume and wah, which can send 2 different messages. So yeah, it was designed for Line 6 amps, but they also have MIDI on it, and it's super handy.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool that you're playing with the music as you DJ. You know, you're adding your own stuff and building on it. And I guess that probably changes the set every time, right? Do you have it? Is it very strictly worked out, or are you more improvising?
That's, I guess, the main reason I haven't done it all in live is because it's quite improvised. I like to be able to arrive somewhere with some new music and like have a quick listen in the headphones and just throw it on, And I'm also used to DJing functions where I was DJing weddings and all sorts of functions where literally things change on a dime, and so it felt very restrictive to go to a setup like live initially. Having said that, if it's my own music and I build up enough of a catalog, like I could see myself building a sort of a set that's my set, and then having some leeway because I'll always want that. But the thing is, I feel like I'll never be happy. I'll always want to just, even if it's my own music, somewhere along the set, I'd be like, there's a song that would be perfect right now. And it's like, if I don't have that at my fingertips, I'm going to be frustrated. So I kind of see myself always having some sort of a hybrid setup.
Right. Yeah, it's nice that you're thinking about that stuff, especially at like parties and weddings too. I find very often like the music at your average wedding is the same. You hear the same songs and there's no real thought that's going into it. It's just like, all right, we're going to go through this. We do these songs for a few minutes and we do these. And then, everyone sits down. It's just really scripted.
Yeah, some DJs actually use, I forget what the program is called. In fact, it might just be with Virtual DJ, but they'll have a mix, a playlist ready to go, and it can auto mix, and they'll just assign tracks to be the next thing that plays. So they're not really DJing on the fly at all. They're just letting it mix, but they're kind of just queuing. So they're, curating more than DJing.
Right.
Which is fair enough, I guess.
Yeah, different job for different situations, like not really many people are going to the wedding to check out the DJ and their creative work. They just want the music to dance to and have a good time to set the mood.
Exactly. And I think part of my thinking was I'd like to be able to, if the opportunity arises, play a bit more of my own stuff. But like sometimes you just can see it's not really going to work. So I kind of had some sort of a setup that I could at least do something of my own if the opportunity arises. Having said that, I'm very grateful to have had other work lately, and I've had a big break from DJing. And I realized that a lot of the music, especially for those sort of functions and corporates and weddings, a lot of the music I wasn't really enjoying, but like I feed off the crowd energy. I read the crowd, and like if they're enjoying themselves, I'm enjoying myself. But it just sort of hit me during the lockdown. I was like, wow, there's a lot of this playlist that I'm not really a fan of.
Right.
I've been enjoying just having the break, and then I'd like to be able to go to a party and just be a guest for a change and not be the music guy. But I always seem to get pushed into that role.
Yeah, you enjoy what the music does to the crowd, but not so much. You take the crowd away, and it's like, well, this is not really my thing.
Yeah,
that is the curse sometimes of the musician. They don't get to ever like dance. If you're in the band, you don't get to be on the dance floor. You don't get to experience it. But it's to call it a curse is a wild exaggeration. It's definitely an amazingly fun thing to do. But,
that is the sort of the other side, the shadow side to it. Is it can be quite isolating sometimes. You're working long hours. Anyone who might want to chat to you is not going to be there to chat to you when you're finally off. When you're DJing like 6 to 8 hours, you're right there till the end, and then very drunk people left, if any, and it's not the same thing. So yeah, it's interesting.
There's certainly a special character to the ones that hang out until the end. Those people are in it for the long haul, Everyone else has decided, you know what, I've had my fun and I'm going to call it a day. But those people are like, I'm getting every drop out of this night.
And then they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was kind of cool in your story of how you got started, how it was, sort of accidental. You were at a party and an uncle is DJing and you've kind of walked over there. I think that's just like something as musicians we should all consider and give back to the young people, because they don't always know what's available to them. Like that's even an option. That's something you could have been doing. I know for me with playing guitar, like I just had never really been around anybody playing guitar or playing really any
Right.
music. I didn't have too many people, friends, family that were musicians that I ever got a chance to just like watch and kind of get shown, hey, if you do this, you do that. But once I did at 14, you know, it just opened up a world of possibilities I didn't even know existed.
Yeah. That's true.
You know, I think it's a great thing to pass on, you know, especially when you're young and you're not, don't touch those buttons, and you can actually say to them, yeah, you know, play with it. It's called
a very good
push. You're
point.
supposed to touch it. You know, that's the point of this button is so you can push it and this fader and everything. So I think that's always very exciting for young people when they're finally allowed to touch the gear.
It's true. That's a very good point. I mean, I was grateful. I mean, I was lucky that I grew up around, I mean, from my teens, my stepdad came into my life and he plays guitar and he builds guitars actually. And that's sort of his main business now. I think he sells electric ukuleles or ukateles. Actually, I'm not sure if they call them that anymore. There might have been a reason not to. In any case, because his name is Brian Fanner, and actually Fender tried to send him a cease and desist, but it's like his name. So I think he got away with using his name.
Wow.
But I think there were also other little things that they took issue with. But yeah, it's almost a badge of honor these days to, hey, you got noticed by Fender.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're doing enough to show up on the radar. That's not too bad. Yeah, that's nice though that you were able to get that exposure, you know, to this whole world. And you know, who knows, you know, I don't know what it would be like for you if you didn't get that, and I don't know what it'd be like for me if I didn't get it either at that particular point in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I'm not sure where I would have gone either. It's quite interesting. It occurred to me recently. I was just thinking through everything. I think it's because through the lockdown, one of the things I found myself doing is listening to a lot of the music that I started out listening to, and not as much as I would like, because I find when I'm working now, I'm listening to this music in a completely different way. I'm able to sort of, I can tell how a lot of the sounds were made, and I'm hearing little things in the mixes that I'd never noticed before. And it's quite fascinating, you know, noticing problems, you know, that like,
Oh yeah, wow.
I guess aren't problems because you never noticed them before.
Right. Yeah. Problems in music is definitely like a fluffy idea. It's not very consistent all the time. And problem to one person might exactly be the thing that draws another person in.
Yeah, it's true.
So, yeah, it'd be funny, right? If we didn't have that experience, maybe we'd be doing like a podcast on like finance or something.
I remember someone saying something similar. I studied at a college and we went to a recording studio, like on like a field trip. And this guy was like, we were like all standing outside excited. And he was like, imagine if we were like accountants and like excited to like look at the books right now.
Right. Yeah. Let's see your profit and loss sheet here. All right. Yeah. Look at that. This is a vintage profit. So what was the work you got into over this whole change in our world, this lockdown stuff? So you say you've been DJing and then you found your way into some other stuff?
Yeah, so I decided to just do some streaming because I guess was just an outlet. I really kind of had the setup, and I think part of it was also just the challenge of hooking everything up, finding a way to get it streaming correctly, and technical troubles. I guess that stuff interests me. So every week there was some new tech challenge, although some of it wasn't fun. I had issues with my laptop, which I ended up moving back to Windows 8.1, and it's been pretty solid since then, which is interesting. But anyway.
What year is that from, out of curiosity? Do you know?
I think it came out 2013.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the laptop was a 2014 machine with a 8.1 sticker on it or something. So I guess something's not happy on 10. Sorry, I think we got off track. What did you ask me again?
Oh, well, you were doing your live streaming. You took a little change in direction.
Yeah, basically, in late November, I was chatting to a friend on Discord, and he was complaining about his home situation, and he was like, "Let me just look for a job," like almost, just as a sympathy. I was like, "Oh, I should have a look as well." And like, where do you even look these days? And I happened to go onto Facebook and find an audio-related job, basically working for an online radio station. And initially, the brief was about editing podcasts and possibly setting up a mobile rig to teach the youth to get into online broadcasting, basically. So I thought that sounds cool. I'm not really mobile in terms of I don't see out of my right eye, and so I'm not able to drive. So I thought, I'm probably not going to get this job because it sounds like I need to be mobile. But hey, I'll apply. It's an audio-related job, and I'll feel like I did something today. That was really my feeling was just like, you know what? At least I did a thing today. I didn't think of it like I'm going to get this job. I didn't think at all. I thought there'd be loads of people looking for work during a pandemic, especially in the sound. So then it's like a week later or maybe 2 weeks later, like, hey, when would you like to have a little interview? Like literally within 5 minutes, I was like this on Zoom, chatting to him and ended up getting the job. And so I've been, at first it was just podcast editing, and then it evolved into also we only broadcast 1 day a week. We'd like to expand to more eventually, but initially it's 1 day, and then there are certain shows scattered through the week, but generally 1 day, and then we rebroadcast that day. So it's a Sunday all day, and then a repeat on Monday all day. And then the individual shows are about half an hour to an hour in length each, and then they get uploaded as podcasts on like Thursday. So I'm sort of doing most of the day-to-day audio stuff, pre-recording some shows. Sometimes a guest is in the States and we're on South Africa. We're actually on UK time, which is an hour behind me. So, I mean, it's 5:30 my time. What is it, your time again?
Right now it's 11:30 a.m.
Right. So, I mean, sometimes we'll record someone in the States in the evening or someone in Australia first thing in the morning, like 9:30 in the morning. And basically how it works is we're running it through Zoom. So we're all working remotely. People come, I open up the Zoom room, let in the presenter and their guest, and ahead of time, the presenter will have sent me the songs that they want me to play, like a track list or running order, they call it. And so I'll have them ready. I'm actually running it through Ableton Live. Pardon. And I have all those I've got the jingles on a track here and some wishes and things. And I've kind of routed, it was a bit of a routing challenge to figure this all out, because I wanted to get Zoom into Ableton, and then I want a signal going to the broadcasting app. And then I wanted my system audio in case I suddenly have to play something on the fly off YouTube or, I figured there'd be eventualities, which indeed there were. So I'll have a track for jingles. I'll have a track for music. I could actually show you I can screen share maybe if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But that's the gist of what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's always a challenge for me too, and a lot of people over Zoom. How do I send my microphone? How do I also send Ableton Live? How do I also hear it? How do I not hear my microphone echoing in the background in Ableton? And how do we get the guest audio? So like I've got right now, the way I do it on the podcast, I record through Zoom. That's sort of the backup, and it gets the video. But inside of Live, I've got my microphone plugged into a track like you would normally if you were doing vocals. But then I'm using an app called Loopback to capture Zoom, the output from Zoom, which is your voice. And that's now a track in Live as well. And this way I'm getting separate tracks.
Nice.
And then if I get a recording of your voice after the show, I can replace the Zoom one, and it'll be, you know, a cleaner recording coming directly from the source rather than over the internet, where there's always the occasional like Zoom glitch sound.
Zoom is strange for audio. I mean, even with the, like, I've got this turn on original sound button, just clicked it now. And I mean, with echo cancellation turned off and all sorts of things. And still I've listened back on my phone, like joined a call on my phone, and there'll like be moments where it like stretches and then it catches up on itself, and it's not great.
Yeah. It's an interesting kind of technology, I guess, the way it does that. It doesn't just drop it. It elongates it, and then all of a sudden the person goes into like fast forward mode for you. Like it buffers it or something, and then like zips it back. And it's interesting for me on the editing side when I look at what the guest gives me, and then I look at what Zoom, like there's sometimes I can line it up and it's in sync, and then Zoom gets a little weird, and then it takes like a little bit of time for it to sort of match back up again.
Yeah.
It can be confusing if you align the wrong spot. It'll sound good for like a minute, and then, you know, everything gets a little weird.
So for the Sunday broadcasts, I like when I'm pre-recording a show, I will record straight into Live. I'll record into arrangement, and then whatever I trigger in session view, like jingles and music, will go in exactly where they would be. And I'll just record enable the voice tracks so that all that's getting recorded, and then my mutes, switching tracks on and off, gets recorded. So I can go back and edit all that automation and move stuff around if I need to. But for the broadcast days, when it's like a whole day of broadcasting, I find Live often hiccups after an hour. It'll just randomly stop recording. It doesn't like make a new audio file automatically. It just stops and doesn't warn me. And I once had one where I'd recorded 2 hours. I think I knew around an hour. During a song break, I stopped the recording and started it again to like hopefully overcome that hour glitch. And then at the end of the second hour, I was trying to edit and my computer was like really lagging. And then when I sort of thought, okay, let me restart Live. When I restarted Live, it said my files were corrupted. So I don't really trust Live for like long recordings. I've had a few issues. So yeah, for an hour here, an hour there, I'll do it because it's convenient. And I also have the Zoom as a backup. But yeah, for the broadcasting, actually, my sound card has a secondary output, like an RCA out, that I run into an old DJ sound card, which is actually under my push. And that goes into my laptop. And the point I was getting to was actually that often that recording wasn't in time with the video that was recorded in Zoom. It often like would literally just completely drift, and never get back in time. And I would have to just figure out a playback rate in repo, like 1.10 something, or 0.9 something. Yeah.
Is that the result of some kind of like sample rate difference, or?
Not as far as I can tell. And I remember having this years ago as well. I've seen some video editors say they have the same thing when they record in OBS and somewhere else. Yeah, it's weird. It's still an issue.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we used to always deal with that with tape machines just because the mechanism plays back slightly different every time. But yeah, you would think in digital it would just always be perfect.
It could be something with my laptop, come to think of it, because I sometimes have had to set my BPM. If I'm jamming with someone and they're at 120, I might have to go, my one friend, I had to go 120.01. And I was jamming with someone this past like Tuesday, and I had to set it to 0.03 or something, my BPM, and then it was like locked in with his. I was like, wow, this is weird.
Yeah, that's weird. And man, when you're talking about like hundredths of a BPM, that can be mind numbing. I have run into that recording limit though with live on the podcast. Actually, I believe it's a 2 gig limit in the file size.
Right.
I think that's what it is, or roughly around 2 gigs. And I've ran into that because after whatever it is, I think maybe hour, 2 hours of stereo recording, you hit 2 gigs. And then it's just like,
I'm not recording in stereo. That's interesting. And it was often around an hour 15-ish that I would just suddenly, I'd like happen to look at live and I'm like, oh, it's playing back the recording. That's weird.
Yeah. Maybe I'm recording at 44.1 as a...
I might be at 48.
It might come a little quicker then with the larger file size. Yeah, that was a fun discovery, I was recording the Zoom audio as stereo, but I've since learned that that's not necessary. So I just make it mono, and then I don't run into that as often. But it's always something to think about. And I am a little surprised, being that live is specifically for live performance, or initially anyway, designed with that in mind, that sometimes you play for more than an hour or two. So how come we can't record that long?
Yeah, odd one that.
But
there are a few odd things with live that, I was really happy to see 11 getting scene follow actions. That was something actually John and I played. John has his band called Pravda. And when I initially joined it, it was more an electronic foundation and then live instruments on top. So I was sort of like the DJ of the band, and I was playing. What is happening to my camera?
Yeah, strobe lights just came on.
Weird. It's the second time I've seen it do that. So yeah,
well, you were talking about playing live, so maybe it figured, Siri or Alexa's listening to you. Start the party time.
That's great. Yeah, so we'd have a set list that we'd follow, and didn't always want to have it in a range view. I suppose a range could have worked. I could have jumped backwards to a marker if we wanted to repeat a section, but it was easier at the time to just have different scenes for the different parts of the song. But I was often wishing that in the absence of me wanting to repeat a section, it would just go on to the next section. But it was like, okay, great, but this track ends there and the next track starts on another track because we like fading between them and stuff. So to get them to follow each other was impossible. So a couple of years later, they've finally added that. But I do feel like, and maybe it's a mixture. I guess live is just adapting to its user base. There's much bigger production user base than it used to be. It used to be primarily, its unique selling point was performing live with it.
Yeah.
But I feel like they've kind of they're not adding nearly as many features for us live performance people as they used to. And I guess that just reflects its user base.
Well, there has been a push over the last 2 versions to improve like arrangement view and the editing and stuff in there to make like, actually when you're producing a track a little more friendly, and, things like the take lanes and comping and some of the way you can link tracks now, really speed up those workflows. But yeah, I think in the live performance that was built up for so long, and now it's like, hey, well, look, people are now using it for this, so we got to cover those bases too.
And they're doing it really well, to be all credit where it's due. I mean, I love they've managed to keep things feeling very simple and out of your way and yet powerful, Not all programs manage that, like Reaper is a prime example of just like so many buttons everywhere and options in every menu you go into is like too many options. And yet that's, I guess, part of what I love about it. But it's also, I totally understand why a lot of people would rather just learn something that's straightforward and gets out of your way.
That's one of the main things that attracted me to it, because when I was using Pro Tools, for instance, and I was even using Digital Performer, which I liked a lot, and Logic too, but to a lesser degree with Logic, I felt like I was making music like in spite of the software, like I was working around it to get my music done. And that is definitely a testament to my own inexperience at the time. But when I did come to Live, I felt like, oh, like it's helping me make music now instead of like I'm trying to fight against it to do it. So, and I don't know what the exact reason for that is. It might just be sort of like a simplicity or a consistency in the look of everything. Like all the devices have like the same looking knobs, and it's
There's
not
a
like
consistency in the shortcuts and stuff as well, though. Like whatever you've selected, the same shortcuts apply. Like Control D for duplicate and Control R for rename. It's like those things apply everywhere. A lot of programs, you have to know a different shortcut to rename a specific thing on a track versus the track, or a different shortcut for duplicate the track versus an element on the track. I don't know. A lot of that stuff, as you say, they've made it very consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I think even the look of the devices, I know it, like in Logic, which Logic is awesome. I love it. But every time you open a synth, it's like a whole new spaceship you have to learn how to navigate.
Right.
But in Live, at least like, oh, that's what these knobs, those are knobs, because that's what knobs look like in Live. And it's not a whole new graphic. Little things like removing aux tracks. There's no aux tracks in Live. You just set up another audio track and run audio through it. And to me, that was like, oh yeah, why do we even need those?
Oh, you mean the busing system? You mean, where you would route stuff to a bus and then bus that into another track instead of just like from that track to that track. I know that's something Reaper does nicely as well. I was like, why does Logic do it this way? Or Pro Tools in my case. I used Pro Tools quite a bit.
Logic was very similar. I think it was an effort to. When I explain it to people, I'll often tell them I think like Pro Tools, Logic are real, and I think Logic has really evolved a lot, where they have a lot of these capabilities. But I feel like their programs made a little more for like engineers to replicate the studio, and Live is a little more catered to musicians, songwriters. That's how that feeling I get from it anyway. Kind of remove some of those technical things and some of those like busing and aux tracks. Just you kind of don't really need them in the digital world, but on a mixer, they're vital.
Yeah, I mean, Live still has the aux tracks. It's just I feel the routing makes a lot more sense. It's more direct.
Yeah. I always like that you can just send anything to any track and record it. It's just really easy to make fun stuff with effects and sound design.
Yeah. I'm actually using the aux sends quite a lot in this radio setup that I've got going.
The return tracks?
Yeah. Basically what I figured out to do was send the issue was I figured, let's say I want my music to be -5 dB on the fader. Then every time I turn that fader down, I've got to remember to get it back to -5 dB. Whereas what I decided to do instead was have all my faders at unity by default. So I fade them down and I can just hit delete at some point, like if I want to reset that fader. It'd be lovely if it was like shift and a control on push or some sort of shortcut to reset values. That would be super cool. But as it stands, the delete key is fine. So I have
on push, you should be able to. Sorry to interrupt you, but on push, you should be able to hold the delete button and then just touch the knob, and it should bring it back to its default. Yeah, that's whatever the default might be.
Nope.
No?
Maybe that's a push 2 thing.
I wonder if that's push 2 or not. I'll have to investigate that and maybe get back to you.
Nice.
I don't want to play with this too much while we're recording.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you though, but
No, it's cool. That is, I would love it if there is a shortcut. That would be super handy. So basically what I'm doing is I've got one send going to the master. So I'll adjust the volume there to -5. And then I've got another send going to my headphones. And then I've got another send going to, I forget what the other one is. But yeah, basically I'm using them as outputs actually. So some of the auxes are just going straight to like headphones or, the other one's Zoom. So I send a feed back to you. That's how you can hear the whooshes and jingles and
Kinda sound radio.
cool.
got all the jingles and things there. Yeah, so I can send a separate level also for music. So I can play music in the background and not have it like super loud so you can still hear me. But on the broadcast, there needs to be a different volume for it. So yeah, I'm basically using the sends. And I find it's quite easy actually to see, like it's really easy for me to see where things are going just by looking at the sends. Whereas before, it was a little bit more confusing. So I'm basically, all my tracks are set to sends only.
Yeah, I guess you get
one
that
of them
nice
is just
visual.
the master.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. It's funny, everyone uses it in a different way, different purposes.
Yeah,
You know.
it took me a while to work out this setup because obviously I've got one here that sends me to you. So if I switch it off, you won't hear me. And then I've got another one that track goes into that sends me live to the broadcast. So sometimes I'll be speaking to the presenter off air. And then occasionally they might ask me something on air, and then I've got to just switch the other one on to send me out. So it's almost a waste of a track, but it's not for me because I'd rather have that button there to just send me. I wanted everything to be easily accessible on push. So sometimes those funny routings happen.
Yeah.
I've also got the zoom in coming here. No, that says zoom out. So that goes to broadcast. And then when it's off, I'm just hearing them in my cans. So it's also a 2-track thing. The one track has them coming to my cans, and then the other track sends them out. But it's sort of, I've just sending the one track into the other. So the processing is only done once, kind of just saving a bit of CPU.
Smart.
Yeah, it's interesting. All the things we work out.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing, only because this is how it's worked for me, but you probably didn't have that all figured out on day one when you did your first shot at this, right?
I kind of did. I haven't really touched this template since I made it.
So I guess what I'm getting at is like you were able to anticipate all of the needs and all of the different stuff you'd have to do.
I mean,
As far as, like,
I'd seen the guy before me. I'd seen him operating it in. He's on a Mac and he has a program called Audio Hijack, which is incredible. If I was on a Mac, I would buy that very quickly because he would literally launch Audio Hijack and it would open Virtual DJ for his music, and it would open Zoom, and Zoom is routed into like a VST or AU compressor, and then he had like a level thing so you could turn it down at some point while it's like wireframe kind of or patch bay sort of, what's the word? Yeah, like patcher in FL Studio or Reactor in a way with just modular signal flow. And then one of them obviously goes to the broadcast and you can route the music in there as well. So it was cool. And I basically watched him run the day. And I basically just took a piece of paper and kind of drew all the things and where they needed to go. And I think that was how, literally, I think it only took me about an hour and a half. I just sort of, I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to like figure out crazy routing stuff. I love this. And basically I was like, okay, I need all these things to come into live. and I'm using a piece of software called Synchronous Audio Router. It's like your loopback software, I guess. What it's letting me do, it acts as a not a VST, as an ASIO wrapper for your ASIO driver. So you select your sound card driver. I wonder if I can show you.
Yeah, that'd be cool to see.
Screen.
I bet, especially for any Windows users. I'm usually able to help anyone on a Mac with some of the audio stuff, but
Right.
once we start talking Windows, I'm kind of like,
Right.
it's a different story.
Yeah. Can you see the settings of it live?
Yes, the preference is open. Yeah.
Can you see this guy?
Yes.
A pop-up. So Synchronous Audio Router has my Behringer ASIO driver. And then basically playback devices are what Windows calls a playback device. So normally your speakers are your playback device, except the playback devices come into live and the recording devices go out of live. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but you can add these and then they add these stereo channels. So you can create your own routing. The catch is, and you can name them, which is also seriously useful.
Yeah.
So the result is then, I guess we go in like input config. And here you can see it's showing those two that I created. But first it shows your actual sound card's inputs. So however many sound card inputs you have will be first. And then at the bottom will be the virtual cables you created. So these things in here were virtual pipelines of audio, basically. In other words, if I look here, in Windows, I'll set my Windows output to from system. I've actually changed it on my laptop. It says from system to live, so it's very clear what's happening. And then this is from Zoom to live, and this is to broadcast from live to Zoom from live. And then, so like here, I'm coming in my mic. It's going sends only. This bottom send is to the master, which is disabled because I'm actually routing it to this other track, this one here. So when I switch that on, now it's going to the master. So that's when the broadcast people can now theoretically hear me if I was on the radio. What else? So yeah, Zoom is coming in here. So when you speak, it shows up here, Zoom in. And this is the first send is my headphones. Second send is you. So that send's actually disabled. You can right click and go disable send. That way I won't accidentally send you to yourself and get feedback.
Smart.
and then the third send is the master. So if I go to the sends, can you see them? I've got you in the way. There we go. So like the first send is to phones. That's my headphones. Second send is to Zoom. And yeah, the third send goes to the master. And then on the master, it's going to my speakers. But I've used instrument, audio effect rack, to basically send one signal to the speakers and then another signal to external audio, like using this to basically send it to the broadcast as well. So there's basically two things happening on the master.
So you're using the external audio effect device, which normally you would send your audio to, say, like outboard
compressor
gear
or
guitar pedal or something. But rather than that, you're sending it out to this broadcast output.
Yeah.
Nice.
So then there's a broadcast app that sees that to broadcast thing, whatever I've called it in that synchronous audio router window, is what it'll show up as a microphone inside the broadcast app. And then in Zoom, Zoom, my microphone is set to the to Zoom like pipe that I created, and the output is it's called from Zoom, but it's just to Ableton. Yeah, it's actually better labeled on my laptop because once I fully understood what I was doing, I was like, I should name these a bit better.
Well, I could see how having the sends. So like for instance, you have your mic and you can see like that it's going to the C, which is, I think you said that's the broadcast.
Yeah. So if I have this on, then I'm going to the broadcast.
Just
and
really
this
clear
track is
that
where
way.
it comes in. Yeah, this track where it comes in is where you hear me. So when that goes off, you don't hear me because that's the send here.
Right.
So like if I turn that down, I'm probably getting softer on your end.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So that's that. And then also if I play music, I can bring in a track. So now I can play this off push. I normally have my volumes of tracks. I normally analyze them in Reaper first. There's an extension pack for Reaper called SWS Extensions. And one of the extensions is a loudness analyzer. So it'll usually get my tracks. I get them down to -18 because I find sometimes -14, some tracks, maybe they're a bit older and they actually end up clipping at -14 LUFS, which I guess is the sort of Spotify loudness, as far as I know, is -14 LUFS. So I'll do -18 just so I don't have to worry about anything clipping. And then I'll come into live. When I pull them in, I'll just bump them up +4. And then if one happens to be clipping, it's hitting my limiter at the master. But for the most part, tracks don't clip. They just look a bit like this, like a little softer than normal. And then theoretically, you can hear the music underneath my voice. And I've got the volume for you there and volume for myself here. Sometimes people ask me, is my mic buzzing? And there's music playing to the audience. And then I just have to like mute the music for me. So now I can't hear it. And then I can hear if there's any issues on their mic. So yeah, the disable send is handy also because sometimes you want to leave levels as they are. And you just want to bypass something. Sometimes I want to bypass these sends, and so I can just hear the music. Sometimes they've like said, play it from 10 minutes. I'm like, geez, okay, it needs to be faded in. Once or twice I've actually dragged it into Arrange because I'm not recording into Arrange normally for the live broadcasts. I can go into Arrange, make a fade, and then just move the cursor there when they tell me to hit play.
Nice.
It's a bit of a hack, but yeah.
Well, it's good to be able to act quickly like that because especially on a live broadcast, no one wants to wait for you to do all the editing if you can get away with it.
Yeah.
That's a really nice
So yeah,
setup.
synchronous audio router has been pretty solid. The only issue I've had is the actual outputs, like to broadcast. I've sometimes noticed little hiccups in the sound, like every now and then. It's like if I'm speaking, you might not hear them, but you might hear, and especially over Zoom, Zoom's got its own artifacts as well. So it's less noticeable, but now and then on music, I would hear the little hiccup. So that's why I also just record everything to my laptop direct from, because I'm not hearing the glitches. So I just record a clean pipeline into my laptop. And if it fails for some reason, I still have all the audio from the website that we use for the radio station. Is called radio.co. I'm not sure that I would recommend it, but it does have a recording feature. So when you schedule it, it's like a Google Calendar almost. You'll schedule a show. You'll say which DJ it is. You can have several DJ accounts, and then the broadcast app, you'll log in on your account and it'll give you like a countdown to your scheduled show.
Nice.
And you can select it to record that into the cloud. But it's like 128, I think, kilobytes a second. And I think there's a difference between like a live encoded 128 versus like in Reaper, you can set it to maximum and it takes longer. Like the encoding time is like high. And I feel like that quality ends up better than the radio.co 128. So it's kind of a backup just to have that recording in case. I can always just use that recording for the voices and just replace the music if I need to publish a podcast where the recording didn't happen as planned.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, this is great. This is, I don't know if we mentioned this, but if you're watching the video of this, you can see this whole setup, the whole live set, and some of the different settings that you were going through earlier.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see this in action, because I can understand how, you need this, like anyone doing a live performance, you were essentially doing a live performance. You need to see things, you need to know what's happening. And for me, when I set up my, live music performance set, I'm very careful about like having things easy to find, easy to know where everything is. I don't, like, for instance, you see like your red box, which I guess is what Push is focusing on in the session view.
Yes.
I don't ever have to go left and right in my live set. I keep it to just 8.
I don't either, actually. So this zoom in track I never touch is always coming to my headphones. Occasionally I've triggered background music at the end of a show and I'll just click it with the mouse. But for the most part, this never moves. And in fact, I don't really move it down either. So I've got on the side, on the master track, you can see I've labeled certain presenters like initials. And then I've got like jingles for their show. But what I'll actually do is I'll copy the jingle that I need, like in preparation. I might put music on these music tracks next to their show. But then when the time comes, I'll actually copy it up here. So I'll just, like, for example, I'll take that jingle, put it there. So then when that show starts, right at the top of my push, it's like the first thing. I don't know if you can see that now. Like the top row are my scenes. I can just, my music is always, the next song is always right at the top. So I just always put it there. And I also always load the songs into RAM because I found sometimes live just has these random dropouts with long audio files. I don't know if anyone else has this, but I've got an SSD. My previous system, which was Windows 8.1, also did it. My laptop does it. So I don't know if it's something I'm doing or if it's just live, because I've had it with stems in a band. I was trying to play back stems, and randomly some stem would just drop out and the rest of them would keep going. It doesn't lose time. It just drops out. And it, like, there's the disk light on, but like I'm now on an SSD. I have no idea why it would be doing that. And RAM, hitting the RAM button just solves it. It just never glitches like that, thankfully. But yeah, so basically I'll just move the next track up to the top and hit RAM. And then, so if I'm like literally looking at my email or answering someone, like, because I'm also managing some of the sort of, I'll send messages to the presenter in Zoom. So if someone sends one onto our website on the live chat or something, I'll just pass it on to the presenter. So I might be doing something else, and then suddenly they announce a song and I know it's at the top, bam, play that song on push immediately. And that I find is helpful. Obviously in a normal live DJ set, I would be scrolling down and I would just know where I am. But for this, I just like to know that it's the next thing. I've had 1 or 2 accidents where they announced a different song, but it's called a running order for a reason. So yeah, as long as they tell me during the previous song that they want to change the order of things, I can just rearrange them. But I find, it's helpful to just have that top slot always the next thing that's going to play.
Right. Yeah. Consistency is a big help. Because as you said, and if this was a live performance, there's all these other factors going on and surprises pop up all the time. It's good to at least know, like, there are certain things you can count on.
Yeah. So, I mean, when they announce a song, I have to turn, firstly, this track is when they're going to the broadcast. So I'll first I'll hit play on the song, turn them off air, and I'll say you're off air. I'll also switch me on. And it's also handy to have me on that switch, so I can just mute myself as soon as they're on air. I can turn up my speakers and not have to worry about feedback and worry about me making noise. And I don't even have to touch Zoom's mute button at all, basically. I just leave it unmuted because it's right here.
Yeah. All your controls are in one place. That's nice.
Yeah.
And that's the good thing too, that you can have that so easily. Like once music is playing, you can, if any sort of conversation needs to happen behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, people appreciate that, and I can mute the music for them if they don't want to hear it. But one of the biggest things that was an improvement when I joined was the guy who was doing it before me didn't have a way to send them the music. So there was one guy who was a musician and talking about his favorite songs and how they almost bring him to tears. And now they hit play and he can't hear the music.
No tears.
So it was important to me to be able to at least send the music back into Zoom. So, and it's just an option. If they want to hear it, they can.
That's nice. Very
So yeah,
cool.
live can be a radio broadcast tool.
Yeah.
And I mean,
it's-
I've actually routed DJ software. I just set it to my system thing. I don't use ASIO for whatever DJ program. If I need to use a DJ program, I'll just launch Virtual DJ or something, load a track in and hit play, and it'll come through this system track or VLC, or I could even use Reaper or something. That's super useful.
Yeah, that's cool. Very nice. It's cool to see this in such a different application. You know,
Yeah.
I love that the external audio device, you know, for like external audio effect device is super handy for, you know, using your gear, but it's also just a great way to get stuff out of the computer for whatever reason you might have.
I was taught another trick on that note, like, because people often want to route things in a way that live doesn't really allow. You can use the sidechain listen feature on a compressor to bring audio in. So maybe you want to parallel process something, or I don't know, there could be a reason you want to route a few things into one track and it's not looking so easy. So yeah, that's another little trick that someone told me. I was like, oh, damn, I'm sure I could have used that somewhere.
Yeah, on compressor, I'll just explain it to people. Like when you go into the sidechain portion, you're routing basically another audio source into your compressor, and the compressor's listening and responding to that. You don't hear that though, normally, but there is that little blue headphones icon that you'll see often in live. That's all about like monitoring stuff. And yeah, right next to that sidechain button. And then you can hear the audio from wherever you selected it. So there are certain cases, and I guess you found one here, where you might need to do that. You might want to kind of sneakily grab the signal from somewhere else that you can't always do. And you got it that way. That's a slick move.
That's a nice little hack that someone showed me.
Yeah.
And yeah, the audio instrument one was handy just to get my master output going to two different destinations, basically.
Yeah, that's a clever use. I haven't seen that before, to split the master using the external audio effect. It's great. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a lot of work. You were able to pretty much figure this out and be good to go day one?
Pretty much, yeah. The main thing was just fine-tuning levels. But the advantage is the master is going to my speakers, so I can always, my little Behringer interface has two outputs. I think it says output A and B. There's a toggle switch on the interface. But it's actually outputs 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 when you select it as the ASIO driver. And synchronous audio router just puts those before any of the virtual ones you've made. So 3 and 4 is my headphones, and I can just toggle to that button, and my speakers are always hearing 1 and 2. So I can always just unpress 3 and 4 and hear what the audience is hearing. So while people are chatting in Zoom off air, I can just toggle from what this sender's doing to what that sender's doing with the hardware switch. So I can always just check the levels. And it's taken me a while to kind of find the level that I'm happy with, in terms of having the music, having the dialogues pretty loud, and then having the music at -14. I find that seems to be working okay. My theory was not to have the music pumped, like some stations will have the music louder almost than people chatting, but our station is more of a talk station, so there'll be a lot of dialogue and then some music. And if people are there for the speech, I don't want it to be suddenly invasive that this music comes slamming in, like a film. Right. Films often have that where the music really pounds. And then you struggle to hear the dialogue if you're in your home theater, or your home, hi-fi. They sort of mix them for a cinema where they want the music to really thump you in the chest. Right. And it's not always not always welcome at home.
We often, for that very reason, have the volume control handy when we're watching something at home. One of my dogs she's just kind of a skittish creature, Any little thing will alarm her. So if some shows or movies start, real dramatic, sudden bursts of energy, so we kind of have to, it's okay, Audra. We'll turn it down.
How long have you had her?
We've had her for, I guess, 5-6 years.
Okay.
We got her as an older dog. She was, I think, 4 when we got her. She was actually a show dog. She was used for just showing. How they do. They should look how pretty this dog is.
Wow.
But the owner wanted to get rid of her because she wanted to breed her, and she wasn't having any luck with her. So this particular person had lots of dogs, but they weren't her pets. They were her.
Right.
They were like her products, and it's I think kind of a sad thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think she was
surprised the dog in that environment was skittish, though.
Well, she's really good when you put her on. We do agility with them, just totally for fun. It's not competitive or anything.
Yeah.
It's just fun exercise training. She goes on that floor and she knows what to do. It's just like she goes into character. But she was never used to being a pet. And I don't think she'd ever been around a television. So when we first put that on, she was what is going on in this house right now? Took her a long time to warm up to us. But she's great with other dogs because she was just kind of, you're a dog and you are with the dogs all day.
Right. That's interesting.
It is. It's amazing how, I guess it's just with living things, people, pets, those early experiences can really shape you. And she's very nervous around other people. It took her a very long time to get used to us.
Right. Yeah, I guess how old was she when you got her?
I believe 4.
Okay. Yeah, so she's had a while to get sort of used to her life.
Yeah. She's improved, she's great with us. She's, she follows me everywhere, and certain people that come around more often, she's less afraid of.
Right.
She might even sniff them and let them touch her.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the lady who I'm house sitting for adopted another dog at the start of the lockdowns last year. Apparently the shelter was closing I guess they wanted people to foster the dogs just over the initial lockdown. And I had a feeling he was going to stay. And he did. And she had to leave the country after about 2 weeks. She managed to get what do they call it? I forget. But basically she got out on a government flight. That was a repatriation flight. That's the word I was looking for. She's a UK citizen and there was a family emergency. So I came back. I'd been out of town, my stepdad's farm, thinking that was my lockdown home. And there were actually roadblocks between towns. So I was wondering if I was even going to manage to get back. But basically I had letters from her saying she's leaving 2 dogs and an elderly lady here that need care. So I had a very legitimate reason for crossing the borders, so to speak. It's crazy how they locked us down, but that is what they did. It wasn't interprovincial. It was just between towns. There were roadblocks.
Wow.
So I was able to get back. The elderly lady decided to go home before I got back, so I didn't actually know she wasn't here when I arrived. But then there was this new dog, and he's now very attached to me, Shame. People say when I'm not around, it's like his batteries have been removed. And And he's very sweet. He was very, very skittish in the beginning. Like you come up behind him and he would sometimes jump across the room, you know. And now he's like very chilled. He's getting used to. I took him a little trip away recently to my mother's place, and she's got a little dog who adores him and licks him, and big garden, and he was fine. He knows his bed, and wherever his bed was safe. If he's in any sort of trouble, he's like quickly goes and lies down in his bed, and he was very chilled, didn't seem stressed at all. When I got back here, the other dog who's been with us for 6 or so years, she seemed more happy to see his bed than him. She steals his bed all the time. And I think she'd be quite happy as an only dog. If there was any dog that didn't really need a buddy, it's her. But he loves her, even though she bullies him.
Nice.
Puts him in his place now and then. Shame.
Yeah. They're great. They're fun to have around. You know, I got one sleeping next to me now for the time being, and it's a great thing too. Like as musicians, you know, just have like a little break. You know, a little, because I can only work so long before they need something. They want to go out.
Yeah.
It's time to eat.
Same here. Yeah.
Let's go for a walk. And it's a great.
I'm very glad for the walks, to be honest, forcing me out of the house every day, you know.
Yeah.
And now if one can't happen, I crave them, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you're doing your work for a long time, your ears need a break. They get accustomed to certain frequencies, and things that sound awful start to sound normal. And just a built-in like timeout is helpful.
Yeah,
hey, maybe
switching
I can ask
projects also helps.
Yes, yeah, right. Maybe I can ask
when
you.
you realize like things sound weird, and you open another project and you're like, damn, this is what normal sounded like. Oops.
Yeah, normal is like, it's very elusive in life and in music.
Yeah.
The things like we've gotten used to being normal is pretty weird over the last year.
Our ears are quite adaptive. We'll hear things a certain way for long enough, and we'll get used to how it sounds.
Well, yeah, I mean, a perfect example is like if you have like some sort of like air running in wherever you are, or like a hum from a radiator or a heating element or something.
True. Computer.
You don't hear it until it goes away, and you're like, oh. I think that's a good lesson in music production, that we really notice change. So when you're trying to do something within a project, if everything is moving at the same pace, same volume, same energy, like then change that. That'll be, just take it away, and it'll be like, ooh, something happened.
I've been looking at hardware lately. I see you've got a fair bit around you. I think I saw a bit more of it in John's interview. A bit more of your space. It looks really cool. But basically, I've been looking at like an old MPC, like MPC 1000, or one of the newer ones, if I can find a good deal secondhand. There's a Kai Force that's been eyeing me secondhand. Looks like basically Ableton in a box. And I mean, the things that appeal to me are, number one, no computer hum. If I want to just have a jam, just plug it straight into my speakers. That's one less bit of noise. Also the latency. As someone who likes to jam bongos and keys, and I play drums as well, it's interesting. The keys and push, I don't mind the latency as much. When I played an SPD, one of those drum pads, and when that had latency, when I tried to trigger something in a DAW with a stick, that latency threw me off, even though it was quite low. It's interesting. Suddenly when I was playing with sticks, I was like, oh man, this latency. Whereas I played it with the keyboard, I'm like, is this really the latency? And like when I play the key, I don't notice it nearly as much. But still, when I'm jamming, just to have none is such an amazing feeling. You really feel one with the machine. So I've been lusting after various gear now, trying to figure out what would work for me as someone who maybe like to live loop things a little bit as MIDI even. Maybe get like a little multi-timbral old synthesizer. I've seen like a Nord Lead 2X can do like 4 voices, 4 like separate patches, I guess.
Right.
Or I've seen old like Roland boxes from the 90s Roland JV 1080. I've been looking at like maybe something that's digital, and then maybe one or two nice little analog boxes as well. What is your music setup like around there? Do you have any computerless jams these days?
Do I have? Well, with guitars,
Fair enough.
what? Even when I play music with my buddies in our little 3-piece rock band, I'm still actually running everything through Live to record it.
Right.
So there is a computer element. But if we didn't record, I wouldn't need that. Yeah, mostly though, I am making music unless I'm just playing guitar for the fun of it. It pretty much involves opening Live. I have a tape machine here, which I can record directly to, but I've actually since set it up so that it does run through Live, because rather than plug things directly into the machine, I've just got the interface routed.
Makes sense.
Through a patch bay, so I can just kind of boop, boop, and now
nice.
Going right to the recorder.
I think part of my problem is because I'm now working a day job, so to speak, because I'm not just doing the recordings, I'm also like updating our website and dealing with presenters and like welcoming people, sending them Zoom links, sending quite a lot of emails and scheduling, dealing with that stuff. End of the day, the thought of sitting down at the computer again to make music is a little bit soul-crushing some days.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Part of me would love to stand up. I think even just a standing desk would help. Unfortunately, this is all like built-in stuff, but I would love that. That would make a big difference already.
I got to tell you, a standing desk was a major breakthrough for me. In fact, this table here that's got these synths on it now is this.
Right.
I bought another one of them for like live performance, like because it can go like countertop height. This is not motorized.
Exactly.
This is just you adjust the legs.
Right.
But it folds up real nice. So when I play out, I bring the table with me. Because otherwise, you get a table at a place and it's like for sitting down and eating.
Yes. I've had that a lot
6'3"
as a DJ.
On top of that. So like I'm really hunched over if I'm on one of those tables, and my back will get sore. And so having this, for one, with like the posture and like the ability to move, to like kind of dance around when you're making music, to feel it.
Yeah.
And also,
big difference.
It really is, because sometimes you're sitting at the desk and it's hard to feel it.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's just not the same. Doing music, standing up, it's like you're energized in a way. It's like an energizing process that you're now actively doing something.
Oh, even like recording guitars, sometimes I'll say, let me stand up and play this, because I'll be more physical with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that I loved about the table, though, was it provided a limitation for the gear. Like, I'm only going to use what can fit on this table.
Right.
I also wanted to make sure I could carry everything in one trip, because often, here in New York, if I go out to play in the city, in Brooklyn, if I can park like a half a mile from the show, that's a good spot.
That's close.
So, yeah, it's close. So I don't want to be leaving half my stuff in the car, dropping the other stuff off in the club, leaving that now in the club to go back to get the stuff. Like, it's just, do that enough times and your stuff will start going missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to carry, as someone doing events, I've had to carry speakers, and sometimes you get to a venue and they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so, there'll be a guy there to open up for you. He can help you. And I got to this one place and the caretaker, maybe they'd just spoken to him on the phone and not seen him. He was like an old guy, and it was a 3-story building with no lift. And I was like, there's no way I'm asking this guy to help me.
Right.
So up I went, one speaker and then the other speaker. And as I'm like just getting to the top with the next speaker, like some guy, young guy arrives to help. And I was like, oh, thanks.
Right.
Yeah. One trip is ambitious though, even for me. I've also I basically got my stepdad to build a like a wooden table with a lip on either side, or actually all the way around. There's a kind of a lip, and it's measured to just go over a keyboard stand, so it doesn't wobble forward and backward because of the lip. And I basically just slot it over 2 keyboard stands ideally, and then it doesn't move around much, and I've got like almost like a trestle table but higher.
Oh, cool.
I can get them to like the highest rung of the keyboard stand. And that's, chest height. So I've often taken that to gigs DJing, or it's enough space for like laptop and a keyboard or push and like 1 or 2 other toys. So also the space limitation, and then just a nice cloth to cover it over. And then I have my bongos usually. But 1 trip, man, that would be awesome. I think I need a trolley.
It definitely limits you for me in a good way. But it sounds funny, but getting like a good table to work on really helped me move forward, because before I had that, like there was no set structure to like what I'm using. It was uncomfortable, or I wasn't into it as much.
I've often had to play on weird surfaces where you arrive and like I'd ask them if they have a table, and they're like, yeah. And you get there and they're like, so we have maybe this camping table. And it's like literally one of those tiny little things that are like super low to the ground.
Yeah.
I've sometimes said if it's really going to save me a trip, I'll just ask, like if they happen to have a workbench. Sometimes those like a workbench on wheels or like kitchen type thing, or you get certain things that are like on wheels and are a bit higher, like a workbench, and that's perfect. But often I'll just take my little table.
Yeah.
Extra thing to haul, but worth it. Very, very much worth it. When you're playing for 6 hours to be bending down, it's awful.
Yeah. It makes all the difference. And, when you're building if you're doing like a live set with Ableton Live, or, you're assembling controllers, you're mapping things, you're building an instrument. If you don't have sort of like a limit, you need to pick what you're going to use first and then start building around it. It made a big difference, and it's not the exciting like it's not a new synth or a new toy that makes sound, but it's a big important thing for me.
That reminds me, actually, it took me ages my push is on a laptop stand, and it's got a little tray underneath it. I'm not sure what it was designed for, but I think might have actually been from an audio shop, so I don't know if it was made for audio or not, but I've at gigs sometimes used it for laptop at the top and then an interface underneath. And what it allowed me to do, I like my computer screen is actually kind of close. It's sort of an arm's length. And as a visually impaired person, I kind of like it as close as I can. And to have the push in front of my like typing keyboard would move the screen further away. So I had the push to the side, and I'd had it over there, and I'd had like all these different configurations, and also the mic position. Like over there, I used to have my camera on one of my speakers so people couldn't see my bed and stuff. Before I had a webcam, it was I'd use my phone and I'd prop it up somewhere there. And then the mic could be in the way. And so there were always just like these weird like issues trying to get things. And then one day, I think I tried various different things on this stand. And suddenly it just clicked one day. I was like, wow, this is... And the trick is I forgot about it. And so that was clearly when it worked. It was like suddenly one day I was like, oh my God, I used to struggle with this setup like every day. And now it's just worked like this for years. And like, wow, it made such a huge difference to just be able to sit down and not have to move stuff around every time, you know?
Yep, I totally agree. It's not something you always think about, but when you have to think about it, it's a real pain. So if you can have it in a way where you just get going, it'll make a big difference, because you're going to be sitting around or standing around doing it for a long time. You might as well have it comfortable and make sense. It's just like the project you showed us. If you were building that every single time you did a show, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
So I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned in our emailing, like you could talk about some inspirational hacks, like things to help beat writer's block.
So yeah, I mean, I went through quite a long period of a block. I think it was around 2012 to about 2014. I had just finished, I did 2 years at an audio college. And for some reason coming out of that, I enjoyed it while I was there, and I think I was quite inspired there. But afterwards, I was struggling a bit to make music. And I'd been producing electronic music. I do also I play drums, and I've often played in bands. And I guess that was almost separate for me. But in terms of creating and composing my own stuff, I was feeling very blocked. And I think the first thing that kind of pulled me out of it, there were a few things. I would often get stuck at the start of something and just thinking it's not quite good enough or it's boring. I felt like I knew where things were going before they even went there. And I was limited in a way, just it all sounded the same to me. Like I was just putting notes in a different place, but it was the same sound, or I don't know what it was. I just always felt like it was predictable to me, and I was bored by it, by the music producing process. And I think one of the biggest things that got me through it was getting out of analysis mode, like not overthinking things and just keeping going. Because often there's almost like an uncanny valley of music where it's like it's almost there, but it's not quite there, and you don't really know how to fix it. But sometimes just putting in a few hours, even if it's a grind and you're not really feeling it, you just like have faith. Actually, it's a faith aspect as well. It's just having faith that if I just keep working at it, maybe it'll improve. And I think I hadn't done that. There was a breaking point where I'd gone at a project that I thought was pointless, but I was just doing it for the sake of it at that stage. And then suddenly I was like, hey, wow, there's something to this now. And like suddenly I'd gotten over that hump, and I realized that it just took more time. I had to put more work in, basically. Obviously, some people do the opposite and they overwork things for years. They keep going back to the same track. So I suppose it depends on the character to some extent. I think like the first 3 hours for me, I find are important. If I can sit down for at least 3 hours on something, I can get it to a place where the next time I sit down with it, I'll know kind of where it was going. If it's just an hour or something, I'll probably toss it, unless it's a melody or something. Sometimes it'll carry enough weight that I can continue. But in terms of technical stuff, I feel like it actually does take at least 3 hours initially to get something where the next time you open it up, you sort of see what the vision was and are able to carry on with it.
I like that, the trust and the faith.
Faith was a big thing, yeah. Also having faith that there'll be another good idea.
I think that's a great point you make, though, about having faith. Just trust that your musical taste will come through, and you'll make music you like eventually. You just keep going with it. Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
Also trusting that there'll be another good idea, because sometimes I used to get into this feeling of I'll never make something quite that good again, and that's a weird one as well, where sometimes it could have been partly an accident, and then you think, I won't have that accident again, you know?
You know what helped me with that a lot was sharing my secrets and tricks, like doing tutorials and showing people how I did stuff, because I would get that feeling too, like, oh, maybe my best is behind me, or I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again. But I got this idea like, well, nothing's precious. And if I start relying on some secret preset or trick with the software or my guitar, and if that's all my musical ability is that one little secret I figured out, that's not so good. I need to get it out so that I have to think of something else. So I got to come up with new things.
Yeah. So yeah, the faith was an aspect of it. Just like, I'll just know that I can start something new. And another thing, I used to get option paralysis, where I would like work on something up to a point, and then I'd be like, damn, this would be better if it sounded like that. And it's like, that's a whole pivot and a whole other subgenre or something. And it's like, it could go down that road and it might be a lot better. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to save a copy of this here so I can take that road later. And that was a huge thing for me, because then I would often just end up carrying on the path I was on and never end up going the other way and loving what I ended up doing on the path I was on. So just saving another project sometimes when you think, it like gave me that option. Even if I never take that option, it was a nice, that really helped me through, was just saying, let me just see this idea through before I fork it, like put a marker here and I can come back to it if I want to.
Otherwise,
and maybe I should, but
yeah, you feel like you're missing out on potential, but now you've left that road open. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll tell people to commit and just keep going and don't look back. But this is almost the opposite on some level, where you're saying, all right, well, I have the copy here, so I could always do that. So that's interesting.
And even if I never do, committing is a good one as well. I mean, saving things as audio, but just some people have loads of separate projects. And I suppose it can get too much in that direction as well, where people are like, oh, that mix was better. I don't often compare my mixes. Like, I used to keep different mixes of a track whenever I'd made some changes, and I don't anymore. I'd rather just push forward. I can maybe reference other music, but rather than like other versions of the same thing, I feel like I could get in the weeds there. Sometimes good enough is good enough, and we need to just move on, If you're starting to go between little tweaks here and there, then it's probably good enough, When you're getting to like 2 dB up or down on the kick drum, it's like, then it's probably fine.
It's nice to get into the nitty gritty and, split hairs on stuff, but there is some diminishing returns after a while. And I think sometimes you're better off calling it a day and then making the next thing better. And I've been able to help myself, get through things by saying, all right, I've learned something and it's going to make the next one better. So once I finish this, I'll do the next one and I'll keep this in mind.
That was part of the thing about forking the project or saving another version, was like, I feel like this could be done better, sometimes a different way, but also just telling myself, rather just keep going with this and make the next one better. As you say, that was another part of it, which was like, as long as I'm making something, instead of getting stuck at the beginning, see this through as far as I can see it, rather, and then think about the next one being better. Because often we try and get something perfect, and maybe it's fine as it is,
Yep. Yeah. Oh man, we should re-record all those drums because now this kit sounds great. You know what? How about we'll just finish and we'll make a new one. That assumption, it comes with that assumption that like you'll be able to do another one, which is helpful too. Instead of like, well, I don't know, this might be it for me. We gotta go back and do the drums because I'm out of.
Gotta have some faith.
Yeah. Trust again.
And it's really about getting out of your head and just doing stuff. And that's going back to my first point about getting through that. Oh, things aren't quite right. I'm no longer really feeling this. Sometimes it just takes putting in a bit of extra effort. But just my point is more not overthinking things, If you want to do, then do. Don't sit there analyzing. And if it should be another way, save another version and then carry on doing what you're doing. Just get stuff done. And that's
so important. Just get it
a big
done.
one.
Yeah.
Another thing I've found always helpful over the years is voice notes, just recording I think it's on iPhones, they call it voice notes. On Androids, it's whatever recorder. They'll have a voice recorder app. And you can just make a quick voice recording. And I've often found when I'm walking, that's often I'll get an idea when I'm walking down the street or something, you know, some tune will come into my head and I might find myself refining it, you know, over a half-hour walk or something. I'll be like, well, it doesn't quite work like this. And then I've ended up like composing like quite a kind of a complete little melody in my head. And then I'll record that onto my phone and then I would transfer them off periodically. And then I've got this whole folder of like melody ideas. And it's interesting how they're quite different from the music I make a lot of the time. But it's like maybe one day this will be a little side project because there's definitely ideas in there that are like quite catchy or groovy or, you know, just things that came to me walking. I think being out and about, you never really know when these ideas are going to come. Unfortunately, you can't, it's sort of almost like you need to be in a meditative state. You can't expect things. They just happen when they happen. I find if I try and force it, it doesn't always happen. Just getting ideas, basically. And if you don't have ideas, just do something. I think those are the two things. Like, it's nice to have those ideas pop in, but I've gone through periods where they didn't happen at all, and I just ground out music anyway. So I guess, yeah, some people say they just experiment and come up with ideas like that, and there's an aspect of that with me, but sometimes that also comes from an idea, and I'll have it in my head, and I'll want to put that down in notes. And I think they're both valid ways to make music, and they both come up with very interesting results. You know, some people say to me, "Oh, but like, imagine what could have been if you didn't want it that way," you know? And it's like, well, that's another way to make music, is to not want it a certain way and just make something.
It's a good point. I mean, you have to have a way to capture the ideas when they come to you. You have to be ready for them.
You never really know when they're going to happen.
You have no idea if and when they'll come. But the other thing is a great point. Like, sometimes just do it. You don't have an idea, but do it. You might get an idea while you're doing it. You'll play those chords or lay down that beat and be like, oh, I have an idea for this. And just trust it. Go the process, going through the process of just doing it will sometimes get you there. And if you don't get any good ideas, at least you're practicing the process.
Yeah.
Going through it.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting that you say walking gives you a lot of ideas, because I think that kind of goes back to what I was getting to about standing up and moving.
Yeah.
Like, your mind is part of your body, so it really does respond to being physically stimulated, getting the blood flowing. I always have better conversations when I'm walking. I'll often be like pacing when I'm on the phone. I know the podcast is different. I think
That's a
mostly
good point, actually. I've often done that. I've often paced around when I'm talking.
Yeah.
On the phone.
I think the podcast is a little different because I'm doing more listening.
Right.
It's a good point. Yeah, that's another thing I love about walking the dogs, because I'm out, I'm just, taking a break and open to new things.
I'd never thought about it the way you put it, though, that the mind is another part of the body, and that's a great way to look at it.
I think, I know for me, like, if I get up early and do a little bit of exercise, even 10 minutes, just get the heart rate going, maybe break a sweat, I'm just so much better, so much clearer in my head mentally. I mean, I really need to have an exercise routine, or else I get lazy and I can't think straight. But especially early in the morning, like, I mean, there are times, like, if I do it before I go to work, I get to work feeling like a superhero compared to the days when I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I know all this. I don't always do it, but it's it's a hack. I see it as a hack for when I'm not ready to make music. I don't have ideas. I'm not feeling it. get pumped. And that might even be putting on other music I like and just moving around to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminded me of two things. Number one, I mean, it feels counterintuitive sometimes to get away from the music, but sometimes people get stuck stressing. You end up trying too hard, and actually sometimes you need to stop trying. And with me, it's sometimes going and seeing a friend, going and having a beer in the garden, socially distanced, and just shooting the breeze. And like a couple of hours fly by and you've completely forgotten. It's almost, I liken it a little bit to meditation in terms of being present and not really thinking too much about your stuff. And sometimes a walk, or it's usually a walk might not do it actually. Sometimes it might need to be some physical exercise or a proper sport where you're actually really having to concentrate on what you're doing, because it takes you out of your mind in a way. You're just there. And when you come out of those spaces, sometimes you have new ideas, you have different perspectives on things, you have like revelations, like you never really know what's going to happen, or you just, the simplest, most likely and best thing that will happen is just feeling less anxious about your problems, when you've had to focus on something else for a while, or you've had your heart rate pumped, like your issues seem less and less stressful. You feel like, I can take this.
It's so true. I've found myself in all stages of mental misery, not even just music, but in general, like anything in life can, like any problem you have can, if you just sit and dwell on it, you don't usually get out of the cycle of thoughts. But when you do something, a lot of my favorite things are like this. Music is like that. You forget about things for a little while, or something physical, some sort of exercise. And sports are great because, if you start thinking about your problems, you're going to mess up. And when you can detach from that, and then you come back and revisit it from a new perspective, sometimes they seem trivial, or you don't care about it as much, or you just have a new solution, or just to realize, like, why am I getting so upset about a drum beat? like, let's think about it for a minute, man.
Yeah.
There's a lot, there's many more significant problems and bigger things. And if you have the luxury of stressing about your drum beat, that's not so bad.
Basically,
it's a good problem.
Basically, the hack here is live your life a bit.
Yeah.
Go out there and live life a bit, and then perspective comes in.
Very true, though. Simple, maybe obvious, but very true.
Yeah. There was another thing. I'm trying to recall what it was. Maybe it'll come back to me. I mean, I use multiple DAWs. I use Reaper primarily for production, actually. Mostly because it started out of necessity. I was working at a studio that had Pro Tools, and I was an FL Studio user at the time, and the studio was all on the Macs, and they didn't have a version on the Mac yet. And I was like, well, sometimes we would do like a pitch for an ad, and suddenly I'd be asked to do something I would love to do. Normally I was editing sound for documentaries and stuff, mixing documentaries, editing dialogue. And it's not really a creative process. It's more of an engineering process. So now and then if a musical thing came in, I wanted to grab it with both hands. So I had to just make do with what I had. And Pro Tools for me, you could sequence stuff in audio, which was what my boss often did. But I found Reaper, you could replace the audio. Once you say you sequence a kick drum, you can go into the browser, right click a new kick drum and say like replace selected media items. And then all those things you've selected get replaced with a new sample. And I found that I partly just saw it as me being a bit of a beginner where my boss could just stick to his sample. I was like, I need some flexibility to like switch stuff out down the line. And I didn't have anything like battery. I didn't have a drum machine. I'd been using FL and most of what it came with. So basically ended up in my free time sort of hacking Reaper to kind of work a little bit better for electronic music. And I'd watch guys like Mr. Bill, Tom Cosm, and sort of I would often apply techniques that I saw in Ableton into Reaper just because that was what I had. So I guess my inspiration thing there was more about sometimes using different software forces you to think about things in a different way. And it might be frustrating in some ways when you just want things to work, but it's also like I learned new techniques along the way. I'd used Reason, and it had like this was one of the first programs I used was Reason, and it had like an LFO on the like drum slicer. It was like a slicing thing, and you could play loops on it and trigger the individual slices. And there was like an LFO there for like pitch or panning, and then I was like looking for the same things in a more advanced program like FL or Ableton, and like things I wouldn't have thought to look for, and dug through menus to find, like, because it was visible to me easily on another program, it got me to think in that way. A lot of people say the same about modular, where they would never have thought to route an oscillator into a filter or whatever the case may be to like get filter oscillation at a high rate, or they'll basically they find it gets them to think about things in a different way. And I think there are free options as well, but I think it's useful to learn other software, just if anything, to change your habits, force you out of your ruts. So if you are feeling stuck and tired of doing the same thing over and over again, that's a useful thing to do, is just to switch and be a beginner again. Because sometimes you have to relearn how to do certain things, and you might just find that things are working better for you that way.
I hear you. Like, it's nice to try different things, and even for me, I'm different on guitar than I am on push, than I am on a keyboard. They're all just, they'll make me do different things, and sometimes
different instruments. That's a good point.
Yeah, sometimes I just realize like, oh man, I never would have done that if I was still doing this, or if I was doing that instead. You got to just keep finding ways, right?
Yeah.
That's cool, man. So listen, I've kept you a long time. A little bit longer than I told you I would. But it's really nice talking to you. We didn't even get to mention or shout out your relatively new album, Transmission Control, available on Bandcamp. So you're going by DjangoZa with this. So it's DJangoZa, just in case people are looking for that. But it's cool stuff. It's a nice combination of like some electro and acoustic stuff mixed in there. Nice, like lots of like interesting changes in the music. Actually, is something I was really enjoying. Like it goes from one style almost, and then boom, we're somewhere else pretty quickly. But not in a jarring way always, but like it was just nice how you were able to weave between things. I thought that was a real cool part about your music.
Thank you. Yeah. So I put that out in Feb. I think it was on a Bandcamp Friday, so it would have been, I think, 5th of Feb. And I'd been working on those tracks for a while, and at some point they were kind of basically done. And I knew there were like one or two silly little tweaks I wanted to make that weren't essential, but they were basically done. And they'd sat like that for a while. And it was a point for me because I'd released some other music as DjangoZa already that was more sort of house music. And I was making all sorts of stuff, and I thought this EP almost needs to be there before other stuff I release to kind of bridge the gap. So it's like I felt like maybe in terms of the mood, it was similar to the stuff I had been making, but the genres are changing. So I thought this is a good like midway point if I decide to go into a heavier style or I felt like I needed to put it out just to have it out, and as part of the direction of my music. It was almost like a musical constipation, I just felt like I've got so many tracks sitting there that aren't released, and it wasn't about making a splash or getting loads of plays, or it was more just I need this to be there because people ask about my music and I want to be able to point them to something that I've done. And that was really like I could probably have done more to like promote it, but I also had a day job at the time and I was just like, I need it out. I need to move on with my life. I need to make other music. I need to not have it sitting there that nobody's heard, especially because I'd had positive feedback from some of the tracks already. So I just felt, it was almost like I felt a duty to just put it out because I knew that some people enjoyed it. And that is something I would advise people to do as well, is because you don't know how other people will interpret your music or how it'll make them feel. It might be, we have our own biases as to how we see our music, and we won't see it the same way someone else does. So you need to have it out there and have people hear it. I think it's almost selfish to not put it out. And that was a perspective shift that I had at some point. I'd never thought of it as selfish, but at some point someone made that remark and I was like, damn, I hadn't thought of it like that. Like, it is, why is it all just for me? Sure, it's nice to have music just for me, but not all of it needs to just be for me.
That's cool. And the idea of like releasing music, you're getting it out, you're letting it go. I had Derek Sivers on the show a little while back, who founded CD Baby, and he's really known for his outside the box thinking. He looks at things in just a different way from other people, and that's been a big source of his success. And when he talks about releasing music, he thinks of release almost like in letting go and taking it off your shoulders. Like, hey, I'm all right, it's here you go, bird, free, fly from the nest, and let other people deal with it now. And it, like, kind of like you said, like, just get it out of the way so I can move forward, so that I can keep going. Because sometimes we work on stuff and it prevents us from moving forward and doing new stuff. So that's it's a good, it's almost like therapeutic in that way.
Exactly. It was very much so, was the purpose of it for me at that point. It was therapeutic to just get it out. Because it was starting to weigh on me every time I start another project. I'm like, I've got stuff that could be out there.
Right, like, oh, you're not supposed to be here yet.
Exactly.
Last thing we need is like that kind of guilt and torment. There's enough that comes with it anyway.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Oh, you know what also inspired me was there was a music. I used to play Need for Speed. It was one of the first games I got when I had a computer, racing game. And there were two guys who did some of the earlier soundtracks, a lot of the music. The one guy's artist name was Rom DePrisco, Canadian. He's done quite a lot of other soundtracks as well. And then he had another guy, I think his name was Saki Kaskas, and he passed away a couple years ago, and he'd been working on an album. He'd like quit his sort of music career jobs to like finish this album. And he hadn't finished it, and basically his friends in the industry like literally like flew from the one guy who came from Australia to like work on basically finishing the album. And I just like, it was like an emotional ride watching the video that they'd made like about the whole story, and it was just quite moving to me. And I thought, also, I don't want to be that guy. I want my music to be out there. I don't, like, nobody knows my passwords, it was that kind of a thought pattern. I was just like, I don't want to be that person. Like, it's awesome that people did that,
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, if music needs to be released, it needs to be released.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And a good reason for us all to get to work, right?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So where do you like to send people to check out your stuff?
I guess for music would be DjangoZa.bandcamp.com. So that's DjangoZa.bandcamp.com. That's where I've put out the EP. I guess it's sort of jungle music and breakbeat, glitch hop almost. Yeah, it's sort of
There's a
goes
few
between genres
dance
a bit. Yeah,
to a lot of
sort of
genres. Yeah,
down
It's
tempo
nice,
vibe. And I got John actually played guitar on the first track, played one of the guitars. Then there's a sort of a little solo bit by another friend of mine. And the one track has a flute. That was a cool track where I'd started the day after a jam at a little cafe somewhere where this guy had come along and he was playing incredible flute. And I'd like live looped something on push with like a shaker and a kick and a snare. And he was just, I think I had some bass going on push and I just couldn't believe the sounds I was hearing. And I was like, I think I posted on Instagram like a little clip. I was like, definitely getting this guy's number. And then I ended up joining a band with him in it, but I hadn't actually played him the track. And like one day he was at my place to record something for the band. And I was like, hey, it was literally like a year and a half later. I was like, hey, I've got this track. And as I was playing him the track, he was like riffling through his bag to like find the right key. And I thought he was going to like check what key it was and like get another one to find the right key. It was like as soon as he was playing it, I was like, oh my God, hit record, turn the monitors as soft as I can. It was literally a one take. And it was like literally from when I hit record, there's a little fade on it somewhere. And I'd basically used the entirety of that little one take.
Wow.
Every second of it.
That's cool. It's
So
nice
that was
that you were
such a
able
nice
to grab it.
special moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, that's the EP, and then people can find me. I've got a YouTube or Twitch. Twitch is twitch.tv/DjangoZa_music. SoundCloud is also DjangoZa_music. Twitch, I've been just streaming music production occasionally. It also gets streamed to YouTube. I guess people just have to search for me on YouTube. And that's more music production in Reaper primarily. It can be informative if people ask questions. I'm always happy to sort of stop what I'm doing and like explain something. I enjoy that interaction. And that's about it. Yeah.
That's cool. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes so people can find it.
Cool. I can
join
send you
along.
links as well.
Yeah.
I also did a tutorial series on Reaper for electronic music production on the Reaper blog. Here's John Tidy runs the Reaper blog website. Sort of, I think it's the unofficial Reaper blog to be like it doesn't work for them, but he does a lot of amazing videos for them. Does what's new in Reaper like videos per version that come out. And basically I got hold of him and did a guest 2 videos. They're a bit old now and not all of it applies because they actually added a feature that I needed shortly after the video. I'm not sure if it's coincidence or not. They added swing to the arrangement. So in Reaper, you could have in the MIDI piano roll, you could add swing. Like you can just with a slider basically, and you would see the grid lines move. So you could draw in notes that are swung, or you could quantize to a swung grid. And what I would do is I would put 2 notes into a clip, and I'd use tab to transients, would also tab MIDI, and I would like slice at the points, and then I would use that as a guide. You could like get the tracks below it to snap to that top track. So I'd have a guide for swing. And then they added swing to the arrangement. So that technique no longer applies. But yeah, those 2 videos, John was saying he watched them the other day because he's also been dabbling with Reaper. So yeah, they're still useful, I guess.
Right. Hey, maybe you helped inspire a change. You said, oh, we can't have people working like this. Let's add that in.
That's great. Yeah.
Excellent. Really fun talking to you. And I appreciate you taking us through your live setup. That was really fun to see. If you're listening, it might be worth heading over to YouTube to check out the video of this just to see what was going on there. Really clever routing and solved some interesting problems in a very smooth way. So I appreciate
Thanks,
that.
man. Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope I explained it properly. A bit of a scatterbrain.
No, I think so. It was nice, with the visual aid, it was pretty cool to see how everything connected.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I ended up doing was having a separate track for certain things so I can switch on that track, like switch myself on to going to a broadcast or switch on you to going to the speakers versus coming to my headphones. So now and then there's a superfluous looking track, but it's mostly just so I can use the on and off buttons at the top of my push to like mute and unmute things.
Right. Yeah, it's great. You make it for what you need, to do the job.
Yeah. Push as a broadcast mixing thing. Who knew?
Who knew? Well, I would say head on over, check out Django's work. It's a lot of cool stuff, some good stuff to learn too, I guess, especially for Reaper users. And after that, I would say to have a good day, everybody. And thanks to Django for being on the show.
Thanks, man. Have a good evening.
You too.